Hi, this is Mark Davidson with Camphil USA. Depending upon where you live, your economy has probably gone through several cycles of starting and stopping as infection rates from COVID-19 have gone up and down. And while this is a major inconvenience for us on our day-to-day life, for property management companies that have to deal with the complexities of large office buildings, retail environment, facilities like that, it's even more difficulty. There's an added layer of complexity for them. Some of the tenants in their building are regulated to be forced to close. Others have to deal with separate hours. There's a lot of it's a lot of moving parts for property management companies. So what we don't want to have happen though, if you're a property manager, is we don't want you to feel like you're in that situation where you have to balance doing what's right with the day-to-day cost of operating. So today we'd like to talk to Camphil's John Holmes. John has spent a lot of time with commercial office buildings and property managers, and he's learned to navigate through some of the minefields that they're facing, especially in this pandemic that we're facing. So John, if you would take a second to introduce us to yourself.
Thank you, Mark. John Holmes here, based out of Calgary for Camphil Canada. I've had the pleasure of working for Camphil for the last 7 years and spend the majority of my time working with those in the property management world. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your time. I guess first question I have, based upon the customers that you deal with every day, a lot of these are property managers. What are you seeing? Are they doing what they can to address the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, for the most part, absolutely. Some folks are taking it very seriously, and others are doing kind of the bare minimum just to get the doors open again.
Okay, well, let's explore that a little bit closer then. The ones that are just doing the bare minimum to get the door open, what would you say is the motivation behind that? Is it just the complexity of responding to all the demands, regulations, and different things like that?
Yeah, I think a big part of that has to do with they have so much on their plate as it is, and surely they're not going to become a filter expert overnight. So when ASHRAE says MERV 13 at a minimum, ideally MERV 14, a lot of folks just go, okay, MERV 13, let's put that in there. Also, the fact of the matter is that even before COVID, a lot of these buildings have had big vacancies and a lot of revenue coming in. So they're trying to do everything they can to, take care of their tenants and staff, but really have quite a limited budget as well.
Okay, so if I heard what you said, then you said there's organizations recommending minimum guideline filtration efficiencies like MERV 13, I believe you said. So what's wrong with a building manager who's not a filtration expert and they're getting information that says put a MERV 13 filter and that's the minimum? So what's wrong with that? What's the drawback to that?
Mark, if they're getting true MERV 13 rated filtration, absolutely nothing. It would be ideal to have MERV 14, but a lot of people don't know that when you buy a MERV 13 in your typical 2-inch plate, it's actually a MERV 8 anyways. So while you get the placebo of protecting you and your tenants and your staff, the reality is that air quality that you're paying for is not even close to what it said on the box. And that typically happens we can talk about the technicality of that, but usually within about a month or so. So while that minimum recommendation MERV 13 is great, we always recommend, having a MERV 13A or 14A rated product. And if you don't know what that is, certainly have an industry expert come out to your facility and take a look, because after all, that's what we do on the day in and day out.
Okay, so John, you mentioned 2-inch track. So I assume you're talking about a 2-inch sliding side access track that many smaller air handling units are equipped with. And as you said, that limits their choice to just a 2-inch filter. So again, why not put a 2-inch MERV 13 filter in and call it a day?
Sure. As I mentioned, most MERV 13 2-inch plates out there are actually providing MERV 8 air quality. So save the expense knowing that you're only getting MERV 8, and more importantly, get an industry expert out there to take a look at your facility, see if perhaps there are other options. I mean, for instance, there are MERV 14A rated 2-inch plates available in the market today. So you could actually have true hospital level air quality in your facility, even though you're only having a 1 or 2 inch track on, for instance, a rooftop unit in a mall. Further, there's other options to maybe adding a larger track, so you could accommodate a larger filter without a huge retrofit. It's actually a pretty easy procedure to get more depth to allow for better air quality options. And finally, if those aren't available to you, another recommendation by ASHRAE is to consider portable HEPA air cleaners that could supplement the air quality you're bringing into the building.
Okay, now in the very beginning of this conversation, you'd mentioned that you kind of broadly split the property managers into two categories. Those that are doing what they can, and then those, I guess you could say, are going above and beyond the call of duty, so to speak, and they're really doing everything they possibly can to provide clean air. So what benefits does that group see from that? Is it just a case where they're spending an enormous amount of money and getting clean air, or are there additional benefits that come from that?
Absolutely. The first thing is, I guess there's a big perception that getting higher level or hospital level air quality, you have to break the bank, and you really don't. What these folks are finding is that for 1/10 the cost of UV, for example, they can have hospital level air quality in their facility, which not only makes their tenants and their staff happy and healthier for sure, but their equipment works better, and there's actually an energy savings as well, because when your equipment's cleaner and works more efficiently, you're not paying as much in energy just to bring the same amount of conditioned air to the tenants. Further, there's a lot of technology out there these days that perform better longer. So what that means is you don't actually have to change the filter as often. When you don't have to change it as often, there's a significant amount of labor that's reallocated. Typically about 3 weeks of labor for every 1,000,000 square feet you have. Your staff now can focus on things like tenant engagement rather than simply changing filters, where there's really not a lot of value add. So absolutely, investing in your air quality makes a lot of sense. Fantastic ROI, and it's just an overall great idea to maintain, maintain your tenants at the end of the day and keep them happy and healthy.
Okay, great point. So it's your classic return on investment. It's a little bit like you get what you pay for. You invest a little bit up front, and you get a great deal of return on the backside. One thought, John, I'm going to circle back to something, because we've had other people on here talk about MERV and MERV-A and how what that really means. So you were saying earlier that a 2-inch MERV 13 performs as a MERV 8. Now, we've had others on here mention the same thing, and this is a very complex detail explanation, as you said. But can we talk about that just a little bit? So if you have a 2-inch MERV 13, you're getting MERV 8 filtration in reality. How does that actually come about? What's the mechanism behind that?
Great question. I'll try not to bore you with the details, but if you can think of, great examples of Swiffer. On day one, it works amazing. It uses static electricity to have negative and positively charged particles that attract to each other, and it's fantastic. On day two, your static charge is gone. Now you're just pushing dirt rather than attracting it. So the same kind of thing happens in a small 2-inch filter where you don't really have a lot of surface area. The only way to get a high level filtration is to impose a really large static charge upon the media, or even just, think of a polyester suit. You're walking around and it creates a lot of static charge. Unfortunately, what happens is that in the real world is those fibers within about a month or so get insulated with particulate that we're filtering out of the air. And as a result, you're now only relying on the mechanical filtration of that particular filter. So that initial number of MERV 13 really isn't accurate anymore. Your MERV A, or actual, I like to call it, is a MERV 8, because now that static charge is simply gone. You're basically using a dirty Swiffer after a month and trying to do the same job as on day one. The big downside to that is not only your air quality is quite poor, but in order to maintain MERV 13, you're going to have to buy more filters and change them up more regularly. So I just recommend to my clients that, make sure you get a MERV A rated filter on day one. You can maintain that efficiency throughout its life without breaking the bank, and you don't have to change filters as often to maintain that level of air quality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great. That's an excellent analogy. I like the analogy of imagining a Swiffer. You're using it on a hardwood floor underneath the bed or something like that. And the first day, as you said, you're pulling out all kinds of dust and dirt, and then next time you come back to do it, it's not nearly as effective. But when you get down there and stick your head under there, you still see lots of dirt. So it's not a case there wasn't any dirt. The dirt's still there. It's just, as you said, your electrostatic charge that was on the fibers have been insulated, and they can't reach out and grab the dirt particles. So that's an excellent explanation. And that's a fair point. That's what everyone needs to be careful of, is when they buy a filter, to buy the highest MERV rated, A-rated filter that they possibly can that will fit their unit. Good explanation, John. Appreciate that.
Mark, just one more thing, if I can add to that. I want to be very, very clear that a MERV A-rated product isn't necessarily just a Camfil product. Camfil has MERV and MERV A-rated products. We like to lead with MERV A because we believe that, you know, maintaining or sustaining air quality is the most important thing, because after all, that's why we're recommending a high level of filtration. But every single manufacturer, every single company that makes filters in this industry has MERV and MERV A-rated products, and it should be stated right on the actual filter itself. So there's also governing bodies in the healthcare segment and the property management world. There's different governing bodies that states you can actually get points for having a MERV A-rated filter as well. So again, you have this option with many different companies. We just like to make sure that people have the right information to make those educated decisions.
Great, good point. And I'll enough on that topic, but one last word on that. We talked to somebody last week or a couple weeks ago that was mentioning that the electrostatic media is the same media that's used in respiratory face mask and medical situations and things like that. And he anticipated a shortage would be coming, because that material, instead of going to air filters, is going to go to respiratory masks. And in fact, that's what we're seeing right now. So the benefit of a charged media, as you said, is very valuable in a respiratory mask, because you don't use those for very long. You use them for a short period of time and then you're replacing them. But as you mentioned, you know, filters are often in there for 3, 4, 6, 12 months at a time, and that's when you're going to lose your efficiency. John, thank you. That's a good way to put that. I hope everyone grasped that concept, that metaphor, because that's a very good explanation for MERV and MERV A. John, appreciate your time. We know you're very knowledgeable in this industry, and looking forward to seeing some of the work you do for us and everyone else in the future. So again, thanks, John.
Thanks so much, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of clear the COVID clutter and educate for the right reasons. So thank you very much.